Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Big East Rewind. I am your 7-foot host from Villanova University, Chuck Everson, and my partner, as always, and my dentist, my point guard, Sonny Sparrow. How are you, Sonny?
Good, Chuck. I'm feeling a little bit short today.
Yeah. Well, you should. We got another big guy in the room. Doesn't matter what sport. Matter of fact, we're changing the name of the show, Sonny. I don't know if you know this.
Okay.
It's fresh off. Wojciechowski has it on TikTok and IG. Today we are the MLB Rewind, Sonny. Major League Baseball. We're taking a break. We're taking a break from college basketball. College basketball's off season, and now that the baseball is underway, is in full swing, I think we should talk a little baseball, and we have a great guest to do that with us today, Sonny.
Let me ask you, Chuck, does this have anything to do with the Yankees winning streak that we're making this move?
It's got a lot to do with the Yankees, I'll say that. Yeah. And the guy was a part of a lot of wins, I'll say that. And
got a couple rings, right?
Especially over your beloved Mets, Sonny.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I was waiting for that.
I'm sorry. So listen, I was at that game, and so was our guest. So without any further ado, our guest, Sonny, is a 15-year Major League Baseball player. He played for mostly the Mariners and the New York Yankees, a four-time World Series champion, Sonny, with the New York Yankees, a 2001 All-Star, and now he does color and post and pregame for both the Florida Marlins and the Yes Network with the New York Yankees. Please welcome in number 43, my good buddy, Jeff Nelson. How are you, Jeff?
I'm good, Chuck. I had no idea that Sonny was a Met fan. I might have thought twice about it. Well, actually, no, because the Mets have always been the stepchild in New York. So I'm good. I'm good about coming on.
Yeah. While we're on the subject, while we're kicking my partner, Jeff, tell him, because I asked you this question. Sonny, Jeff and I met at of all things, a Kiss concert.
Yes.
The last Kiss concert is at the Garden,
I'm a little jealous of that, too. I was in the Kiss Army as a kid.
Were you really?
I was.
Well, my good buddy, Mike Whalen, has a limo company, and he drives around a lot of rock stars and a lot of, people in general. And he said, "Hey, do you want to go to the show?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "Oh, you're going to be sitting with Jeff Nelson from the Yankees." I said, "Oh, okay. That's fine with me." And we had a blast, right, Jeff? We had a good time.
We did. I felt bad for whoever sat behind us, especially you. Because you stood up. I mean, nobody sat down. So
nobody sat down. No.
No.
Well, you know what I do now, Jeff? I apologize pre concert or game or whatever. I turn around and say, "Hey, you're tonight's lucky winner." And they go, "What do you mean?" I go, "You're not going to see much of this because
No.
So I'll buy you a beer and we could be friends, or at least they won't
move your seat. They got to move their seat.
They get pre-warned. So there's that. So anyway, so let's get started with some of the stuff here, Jeff. You grew up in Baltimore. Talk about growing up in Baltimore and how you got involved with baseball, and if was baseball was that the game that you wanted to play, or you really wanted? I know you and I've spoke a little bit. I know you really were into the hoop scene too. So talk about that.
Yeah, we didn't have video games and all that stuff, so it was basically doing whatever we could outside. Whether it was tennis ball, step ball, wiffle ball, we played football, we played basketball. We did everything that we could. I started playing baseball when I was 7 years old, and playing wiffle ball when I was little. I was an Oriole fan, so I wasn't like the avid fan that they are today. That they can't, they're just live and die their home team, home fan. But I would sit in the backyard and play wiffle ball, pretend I was like the Orioles. And, I guess you always had a dream of being a major league player. I always wanted to be an Oriole. But at the same time, I think in a sense, I love basketball more. I was at the University of Maryland. I loved University of Maryland. I was a big Len Bias fan back in the day when he was a Terp. And you would sit in your backyard, and basketball was something that you could do by yourself. You didn't need a bunch of people to play a game, so you could shoot around by yourself. You could sit there and pretend that you were a certain player. And he was a guy that I always loved. I remember when the Bullets were around in Baltimore, I used to run into Wes Unseld a number of times when he used to play for the Baltimore Bullets. So, you know, growing up, it was like one of those, I was tall. I mean, you're 7 feet. I'm 6'6", but I didn't become 6'6" until I was like 21 years old. It was like elementary school, I was always tall. Then junior high, everybody caught up to me. And then high school, I was 6'2" when I graduated. But I always loved basketball. And growing up in Baltimore, you played against a lot of great schools and a lot of great players. And,
Oh yeah.
just baseball wound up being a sport that I got drafted in.
So I got to ask you, wait, you're playing wiffle ball, you said, right?
Yeah.
We played a ton of wiffle ball in my house. And one of the things we did, we would cut out the box score from the paper, and then you had to imitate as best you could their lineup. And this was back when the Pirates had Stargell and St. Ian and those guys. Did you guys do any of that? We wore our little plastic helmets at the plate and stuff.
We did wear the plastic helmets, but I remember the '79 World Series against the Orioles, and I loved the uniforms of the Pirates, because I was a big Parker fan, big Stargell fan, Omar Moreno, Phil Garner, Tim Foley. I could name a boatload of those players, but we used to sit and we had to bat. What we did, we had to bat if it was a Ken Singleton or an Eddie Murray. Even though they were switch hitters, we'd still bat left-handed. Yeah. We used to get the wiffle ball bat, and we used to take the old wrapping paper, the cardboard, and we put it over the bat. Yep. And then we used to duct tape the cardboard cylinder over the bat, just to make so the ball would go a little bit further. Because we lived in a neighborhood that the houses were close together and our backyards weren't that big. So in order to hit a home run, you had to hit it over the roof. And we used to, my dad used to get upset. He goes, "Hey, where's all my duct tape?" I'm like, "Well, it's wrapped around the bat, just to put the wrapping paper cylinder, the cardboard cylinder on it." So, used to do some crazy things just to have fun in the backyard.
We used to do masking tape. Duct tape wasn't as popular back then. And that bat was so heavy on the one end, that was great. Did you ever advance like pitcher, batter, catcher with like a square box and you're pitching a tennis ball or anything like that? Did you ever take it up a notch?
Let's see. No, we didn't. We used to, because we didn't have a whole lot of kids in our neighborhood, we used to play that you had to pull the ball. Like if you, and since we didn't have a first baseman, and if the pitcher caught it before you reached first base, you were out. So it was basically left field, left field, left field. And the neighbors weren't too happy sometimes, because we'd be playing in their yard or hitting it in their yard and have to hop the fence to get it. And then we had this so-called field that was in between neighborhoods that we were able to play. And it was all left field anyway. That was the only big space. So you could get away with playing maybe like 3-on-3 or 4-on-4 if you played a tennis ball.
Yeah, if it goes right, it's automatic out. Yep.
Yes, exactly.
That's wild. I think everybody had that growing up, Jeff, at our age and stuff. I mean, I every year, whatever the season was, that's what we were playing in the street.
Yes, yeah.
Not anymore.
We had football, so this is how we played everything, and so. I was never really a Baltimore Colt fan. I was always a Dallas Cowboy fan, because remember the old electric football men? Yeah. Where you had the game. So the first game that we had was Dallas against Pittsburgh. So my brother took the Steelers and I took the Cowboys. So I became a big Cowboy fan. But we had neighbors, our neighborhood, that we had the main street, but we also had this little sideline, like off this main street, off the curb, that had a little, about maybe 7-foot section of grass between the street and the sidewalk. So we would play Nerf football, and that was the tackle section.
That's where you.
So if you ran on the grass, that was tackle. But on the street, it was touch. So you only had like a 7-foot section to try to, you might be, scraping your elbow or whatever on the sidewalk or the street if you got tackled. But it was one of those sections like, okay, you're at risk there on that little 7-foot section of grass.
You learned some great debate skills too, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Listen, a lot of things come out of that with Sonny. Playing in the park and you choose sides, and it was funny because when I was coaching my daughter's team, or CYO team, I said, okay, we're going to play like the park. We're going to have a pickup game. And they're all picking their friends. I go, don't pick your friends, because you have to wait 5 games to get back on. you know?
Yeah.
And it was a lesson because it's a lesson in leadership. It's a lesson in, you want to, the will to win. And it's not like the AAU mentality, Sonny, where it's just another game. We got another game. We got another game. There's no,
Right.
it doesn't matter if you win or lose kind of thing. So,
you know what? AAU, you brought it up. Jeff,
yeah.
was that any part of your growing up in baseball? Was AAU in the
No, we had Little League, which was the rec league.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, we had Legion Ball.
Yep.
So we never had any AAU or any of that. So, when I was going through baseball as a little kid, we might play 12 games in the summer, and that's about it. And even in high school, when I got to high school, we only played 12 games in high school. And then you went to Legion Ball, and then you might play 20 games in Legion Ball. And when you play 20 games, you're like, wow, this is awesome. We're playing like 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And, other than that, we didn't have a lot of opportunity to play a ton of games like they're doing now.
So how do you get seen? Is it your high school? Do they see your high school coach? Because now they've got, PBR, they've got all these things. It's just nuts. But how did
everybody's downloading they have profiles on the computer now. They have this perfect game and everything that these kids do. I have a nephew that is in Baltimore that he's a senior in high school, but he's going, I think, a college out in Western Maryland. But everything that he does gets uploaded on this site. So scouts now can go on these sites and see these kids, and they can go out and watch them if it's worth it. Yeah. Back then, you actually had to go scout a team. So I went to Catonsville High School, which is right outside of Baltimore. We were playing a local high school that was really, it was a really good school called Milford Mill, and they were the state champs the year before. And I was in the 11th grade. And my dad was a Maryland State policeman, and he always used to come to all the games. And a lot of times he would come in his uniform, and he would stay on way back and away from everyone so he didn't get noticed. But he was there when I pitched against Milford Mill, and I wound up beating them. I think it was like 2-0 or whatever. We beat them, and it was a St. Louis Cardinal scout and a New York Mets scout, actually, that came up to my dad and said, "Oh, hey, this is your son." My dad's 6'4". He was a big guy. I was only like 6'1", 6'2". And they came up to my dad and say, "Hey, we're really interested in your son." And my dad said, "Well, he's only a junior." And they were like, "Oh, wow, we didn't know that." So that probably set the ball rolling as far as me getting scouted. Now, my whole senior year, I did really well in my high school, but Legion Ball, I sucked. It basically, every time that I would have like 20 scouts come out every time I pitched, and I probably would only last like an inning or 2 innings. And it's like, I don't know if it was I saw the scouts up in the stands and I put a lot of pressure on myself, but it's just one of those things that, I didn't do very well. And so it's funny how you get signed and you get drafted off of a scout that just profiles you as, oh, your dad's really big and your dad's tall. I think this kid's going to develop.
So you want to take back your Mets comment at all after he was the first guy there?
Do you want
to retract?
No, actually, no. And I actually had a chance to play for the Mets, and I actually went back and played for the Mariners in 2005, but it was funny.
Yeah. So talk about now, you come out of high school and you're going to get drafted. You get drafted by the Dodgers, right?
Yes.
In the 22nd round, and then what is a Rule 5 draft how you wound up with the Mariners when you first started?
Yeah, so I got drafted out of high school when I was 17, and I was 6'2", 175 pounds, and I only threw 84 miles an hour. So it wasn't like I had an electric fastball. This guy just projected me as being a bigger guy, and maybe there was still a lot of growing left. I might have been one of the youngest guys, if not the youngest guy drafted in 84, because my birthday's in the middle of November.
Right.
So I went and I played. Go ahead.
You're like me. I'm November 30th. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it was, I graduated high school. I was 16 as a senior, and then I turned 17. So I go and I go to rookie ball in 84, then I go to rookie ball again in 85, and then 86 I go to Bakersfield, California in A ball. And my whole Dodger minor league career, I didn't even win a game. I think I was like 0-7 or whatever as a pitcher. But a Rule 5 minor league Rule 5 draft is similar to a Rule 5 draft in the big leagues. So in the minor leagues, they can protect you at a certain level. So maybe say the Dodgers protected me at a AA level. So the Mariners can redraft you in a Rule 5 draft and take you off of in a AAA team. But the difference between a big leagues, so if you get drafted as a Rule 5 in the big leagues, in the major leagues, you have to stay with that team. So if you don't get protected on the 40-man, then another major league organization could take you off of a Rule 5 draft, but that means you have to be in the big leagues. But a minor league Rule 5, I didn't have to be in AAA. It's just like, okay, they drafted me, they picked me off of a Rule 5, so that means Seattle could put me anywhere. And I actually think I went back to A-ball again after I was drafted in '87. I played in Salinas.
Oh wow! Okay.
Well, you got to have some good Bull Durham stories, then, right? You got to have some stories about some Annies on the road. You know, you got to have some minor league stuff.
The minor leagues, I spent 7.5 years in the minor leagues, and most of it I was a starter, and it was you know, what Bull Durham was probably the closest to a minor league experience out of any baseball movie, because you took long bus rides, you had roommates. There was, I guess, young girls that would come to the teams, and back then you made zero money. I think I made $750 a month. It was like you were getting nothing per month, and you're trying to trade baseballs for hot dogs so you could eat. But you go to these podunk towns, but the minor leagues, surprisingly, and Chuck, I don't know what it's like in college and all that, in high school, as far as, you're always looking to, you have guys that are in the same level and same position, and they want to try to make it before you. But baseball was kind of strange because we all pulled for each other. I mean, we had 10 pitchers on his pitching staff, and we all wanted to get to the big leagues, but at the same time, you never really backstabbed anybody. You never thought, hey, I hope this guy gets his butt kicked because I want to be there before he does. It was, you were really close, and you really pulled for everyone. It was one of the most special times that I had. We had great bus rides. We had close knit teams, and it was just a blast to be in the minor leagues those years.
Very different, right? Everybody was very close knit based on the close quarters and everything else, right?
Yeah, it was. And you would think that guys, because you're always looking to advance in different levels in the minor leagues, that you would want that guy to fail in front of you. But I don't know if other guys thought that, but I never wanted anybody to fail. I always wanted guys to succeed. And, I was a starting pitcher back then. And then my last year and a half in the minor leagues, they came to me and made me a reliever. And when I was a ninth inning guy, a closer, that's how I got shot through the minor leagues. And it was about a year and a half, and I was in the big leagues in a couple of years.
I was going to ask you about that. How did that actually happen? Like, whose idea was it? And, being a starter, everybody, I think that's a pitcher's dream, is being a starter. But then how do you move into the next step?
Yeah, they always say relievers are failed starters, and I was a failed starter. It was one of those things that there was an occasional time that I would have a good start, but most of the time I would pitch like 3 innings, and all of a sudden my velocity dropped, because I went from 84 to, when I was 21, throwing 94. So, I gained a bunch of weight. I grew a bunch of inches. I got to be 6'6", about 220, 230. And my velocity started increasing, and I could always throw every day. It's like after I started, I felt good the next day. And when I was in Seattle, the closer in the big leagues was going through a tough time and a lot of injuries. And they came to me and they said, listen, I guess nicely, they probably said, hey, you're going to become a reliever, or you're going to have to go find another job. But they just said, hey, we want you to try to become a reliever, and we want you to become a ninth inning guy, a closer. So I was in AA in Williamsport. They sent me back to A-ball. I mean, I spent like 100 years in A-ball, it seemed like. And I went and I closed for like the last month. Ross Grimsley, who was my pitching coach in Peninsula, Virginia. He came to me and he was my pitching coach, and he kind of turned me around a little bit. And all of a sudden, you know, that ninth inning, the mentality, I had it always, and it just clicked. And 91 came. I was a reliever the whole year. I wound up leading the organization in saves. I went to winter ball, led winter ball in saves. And in 1992, I make the team.
I got to tell you, we have something in common.
I was just going to mention that, Sonny.
Got something in common. The 1984 draft was the second time I was drafted by the Brewers.
He got drafted twice as a pitcher, right, Sonny?
Summer draft, yeah.
As a pitcher.
Now, did you sign?
I didn't, because the deal was, if you sign, and everybody like Danny Ainge was like, you know, you knew these players that now we're doing both.
Right.
You keep your amateur status, but you give up your scholarship. So I was like, you know, I'll play for free. Just pick up my school tab, right?
Right.
And they were like, no, you know, you can get used books, and you know, the rookie ball was $700 a month, just like you said. $700 a month. And I think in Palm Springs was, I think, where it was. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to sign. So
yeah, so we stayed playing hoops at Syracuse. So there you go. and he went from being the starting point guard to being the shooting guard when a guy named Pearl Washington showed up on the scene.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Decisions along the way here.
Yeah, well, listen, you got to adapt, Jeff. That's what you do, right?
Adapt or die.
All right, so now you're in the bigs. You come up, you know, what was that like, getting the call to come up to the big league in 92, right? You came in April of 92, right?
Yeah, I came up in April. I missed I missed opening day. We were in Milwaukee, and I missed opening day, and I got called up the second day of the season, and I didn't pitch in Milwaukee. There was like an injury or something happened. I had a really good spring with them, with the Mariners, and then I missed Milwaukee, and I came up. I missed the first day. I came up in Milwaukee, didn't pitch the last two games, and then we went to Chicago, and then I made my my debut. I went to Calgary, which was a AAA for the Mariners. Now, when I was in AA in 91, Dennis Eckersley was always like with this guy that I always loved watching. And I always threw over top. And in AA, I went on the side. I said, you know what? I'm going to start emulating Dennis Eckersley. So I started throwing and throwing from his windup. And he was a three-quarter guy. He didn't throw over top. He threw three quarters. And he had excellent control. So my AA catcher was Jim Campanis, which is Al Campanis' grandson. So we went down to the bullpen in Jacksonville, and I started throwing three quarters. And all of a sudden, my fastball kept the velocity, but it had a lot more movement on it. And then when I threw my slider, my very first slider that I threw him, and he was a AA catcher, he went out to catch it and hit him in the chest. It had so much break. And then all of a sudden, they said, do not change that arm angle. So that's probably what got me to the big leagues, is going from that arm angle. And I was so effective on right-handers. But
yeah,
you know, you spend all that time in the minor leagues, and you know, you have no idea what the call was going to be. And I closed the first game in Calgary, and then the next night was a save situation, and I'm sitting there waiting, and I didn't get the call. I'm like, what the heck's going on? I said, I know it's the second day, but back then they didn't care how many times you got up and how many days you threw in a row, not like now. So I get called in the office, and the next thing you know, they told me, hey, you're on your way to Milwaukee. And I was like, well, my gosh, this is incredible. And you call your parents, and back then I was married, you call your wife and all that stuff. And my first major league appearance was against Chicago, the White Sox. And I think my first big league hitter was Steve Sachs.
Oh, wow.
And it's just, you know, you absolutely ate up the moment, and nothing really intimidated me, because it's like I spent so much time in the minor leagues. Is when I got there, I was like, I'm not going back. I want to do everything I can to make sure that I'm not getting sent back.
So when you came up, when you were first drafted, what did you have? Did you have fastball, curveball? Like what kind of?
I had a fastball, curveball, but really had no idea really how to throw a curveball. So I went to spring training with the Dodgers in '85, my first spring. Yeah. So I'm sitting in Vero Beach at Dodger Town. You're working out. You're basically throwing with all the big league guys. So you have Oral Hershiser, Fernando Valenzuela, all these guys. There's like this big bullpen mound that has like 8 or 9 mounds on it. And you're throwing yeah, and you're throwing with all these big league guys. And then I have all these major league ex major leaguers and some of these guys coming over and showing me different grips of how to throw a breaking ball. So I have Sandy Koufax, Larry Sherry, Don Drysdale, Johnny Padres, Al Peronowski. I mean, I have all these major league and ex major league and Hall of Famers coming over and say, "Oh, hold it like this, hold it like that." I mean, Sandy Koufax can wrap his whole hand around the baseball. I'm like, there's no way I'm throwing a curveball like that. So they're all teaching you different grips. And I really didn't learn my grip until I got Rule 5 by Seattle and the late Pat Dobson, who won 20 games those years with when the Orioles, they had the 4 starters, won 20 games. He was the one that showed me the grip on my slider that I've kept, and that's what I used my whole entire career.
So, but you went from basically like a 2-pitch, then as you got into the bigs, were you a 3-pitch guy, or was
no? It's just always a 2-pitch pitcher. I never could master a changeup. I threw a split fingered every once in a while, but it wasn't any good, and that was my 3rd best pitch. So it was like, you know what, fastball, slider.
Changeup was never really a popular,
no,
right? As it is today. Like, guys, that's their strikeout pitch. And I'm like, changeup.
Yeah, the changeup is really, I guess maybe in the early 2000s, maybe late 90s, that was a pitch that all of a sudden,
right?
These starters and guys starting to master, and it's an amazing pitch if you can throw it.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, talk about the '95 team, because that team, as a Yankee fan, that team fascinates me, man. You guys were loaded to the gills with talent, right? I mean, you had Junior on the team, you had Randy Johnson, A-Rod, Tino, and Jay Bruner, who in Yankee minds, everybody was pissed that when they Boss traded him. Even made the Seinfeld episode about Jay Bruner. So talk about that team, because you guys had a great season, and then that was a classic series against the Yankees in Mattingly's first time.
Okay.
You guys got me?
You're good. Chuck's frozen.
I'm good.
Chuck's frozen. So he was talking to you about Mattingly in that series, right?
Yeah.
Chuck, you froze up for a second.
Oh, all right, I'm back.
So
okay.
Finish that question about Mattingly's series.
So I said it was Mattingly's Mattingly's first and last playoff experience, because he retired after that year. But that was one of the most exciting playoff series I've seen. That last play when I think it was Junior scored at the end there.
Right.
I mean, it was unbelievable. So talk about that team and the type of talent that you guys had.
Yeah, well, we just came off a strike, because '94 we went on strike, and we were about the middle of August, and we didn't have any more baseball. We thought we were coming back, but the players stood put and said, we didn't even have playoffs, no World Series, anything. And we even went into spring training. So we had a month of spring training in '95, and I think we only played maybe 148 games, something around there. But we always, Seattle, and that was the year that Seattle was talking about, this is the last year for the Kingdom, and they were trying to save the Mariners. And at that point, at the end of the season, we were most likely, if nothing was going to happen, Seattle would have most likely gone to St. Pete and been the Rays. But we had a special team. We had, right there at the end of July during the trade deadline, we got Andy Bennis, we got Vince Coleman. So we had all these great players, but we were still almost, I think, double-digit games out of first place from the Angels. And we went into August 1st, and I think we were 12 to 15 games out. And we had a team meeting in our weight room, and everybody went around, and if they had anything to say, go ahead and say it. Because that year we actually lost Ken Griffey for a couple months, because I think he broke his ankle or something. Mm-hmm. So we had a guy named Alex Diaz take over center field. And besides the power, almost like he didn't miss a beat as far as in that lineup. But we went around and said, you know what? And Ken Griffey was already back. We have the best player in baseball. We have the best pitcher in baseball in Randy Johnson. we have Edgar Martinez, Jay Buhner, Tino Martinez. We have a great bullpen. We have Vince Coleman, one of the best base stealers in the game. And we had a good starting pitching and said, okay, let's try to do it. And from then on, we just took off and we started winning games and the Angels started losing. And it went all the way down to the last series. There was a 4-game series. We had a 4-game series in Texas, and the Angels and the A's had a 4-game series in Anaheim. And all we needed is for the A's to win one, or the A's to win 1 game. Well, they got swept. So we wound up having that 1-game playoff against the Angels at our place because we wound up having the home field advantage. And Randy Johnson threw that game against Mark Langston. And the last 2 months of the season, the Kingdome, I don't know how many they seat, maybe close to 50, maybe a little over 50,000. It was the loudest place that I've ever experienced ever in playing a sport. And you can understand when the Seahawks went in there and play and how intimidating it was because they were the 12th man because it was so loud. I mean, you had to yell to the guy next to you. And then we wound up beating the Angels and the place was just going nuts. And that year was the first year for the division series. The Yankees wound up winning the wild card. We won the West. And the so-called home field, we start on the road. We get beat by the Yankees our first 2 games. And I think the second game lasted until like 1 a.m. And we didn't have Randy Johnson going until the 3rd game. So we knew, okay, we're probably going to win that one. It seemed like we win every time that Randy pitched. And we did. We won game 3. We were down in game 4. I wound up pitching almost 5 innings, and the most I've ever pitched in my career. And we wound up coming back and winning game 4. And then game 5 was just an incredible game. I still think that series was probably the most exciting series that I've ever been a part of.
Yeah.
Now,
I believe
you
that.
mentioned Randy Johnson. Who are some of the best pitchers that you either played with or you saw like firsthand? Who are some?
Oh my gosh.
Because there's some legendary guys. I mean, Randy Johnson.
You played with a lot of great pitchers, Jeff. I mean,
I did.
Randy, Rocket, Mariana.
How about I say, who threw the hardest? Like every time they picked up a ball, you knew that they could throw it by a guy.
Well, you could say Randy, you could say Roger Clemens. I know with you guys, when you guys played basketball, I don't know. With baseball, I wanted to watch other guys and see how they did it. And I always watched Roger Clemens. I watched Randy Johnson. I used to watch David Cohn because he had a similar wind-up and arm angle that I did. So I wanted to watch these guys and how they got guys out. And Randy and Roger always intimidated hitters. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to survive in this league, I got to do the same thing. I got to intimidate some hitters so they don't get comfortable in the box. But as far as guys that used to throw hard, I mean, you have Pedro Martinez, Roger Clemens, you had, Randy Johnson. When we played the Braves the very first time in the World Series in '96, you talk Maddox, Smoltz, and Glavine. Those guys were the first time I've ever seen them pitch was against us in '96. And I was like, wow, these guys are incredible. And it's like they knew exactly what the hitter was looking for. You play against so many guys, and so David Wells, a guy that doesn't throw hard, but that just competes every single time out. I think there's a lot of guys. It's too hard to pick a few, but there's just a lot of guys that really you were in awe of and watching. There was some great years, and so baseball's a lot different now. The speed, the way they clock guys are a lot different than when they used to clock guys now, back when I played. And it's just, I'm thankful that I played in the era that I did. I don't know. I mean, not that I couldn't play nowadays. It's just I'm thankful I'm not playing nowadays.
Yeah, I get that.
When you see a guy like Pedro, right? And he's like, there's nothing to him. And he just, what is it about that size and stature that allows a guy like that to throw a ball as hard as he could?
Yeah, baseball's a sport, probably like any other, that it really, size doesn't matter. You can have, like, you look at Jose Altuve, who's 5'6". I think Pedro was 5'8", and the guy threw legitimately 98 miles an hour. That's when it crosses the plate. So the hitters were seeing 98, and they're not. And at his size, you had Randy Johnson 6'10". So you take a guy that's 6'10" and a guy that's 5'8", and they compete at the same level, and they're just as good. And you know, basketball, you better be tall. Football, you better be a big guy, you know, to be able to stay healthy. You know, baseball is one of those sports that size doesn't really matter. As long as you're a good athlete and you can produce on the field, it doesn't matter. And it's that's what I guess makes baseball, I guess I wouldn't, great for guys not to know. I mean, like a kid growing up saying, hey, I don't have to be 6'10" to play a sport, or you know, I can compete at 5'6".
So you get traded to the Yankees in probably one of the best deals the Yankees made, Stick Michael made at that time, right? I mean, the Yankees get you and Tino, and they give up Sterling Hitchcock and who's the other guy? Russ Davis.
Russ Davis, yeah.
Yeah. So pretty good pickup for the Yankees. I mean, two guys that really contributed to what went on to be 4 world championships.
Two cornerstones. Two cornerstones.
So you talk about being in the right place at the right time, Jeff. You get the call that you're going to New York. Now, are you thinking you have a chance at getting getting a chance to participate in the World Series? Never mind winning one, but what's your thought process when you say, okay, I'm going to New York?
Well, it's funny because it was me, Tino, and Mike Blowers. We were all eligible for arbitration that year, and the papers came out in Seattle. We were thinking we were going to come back and try to go even further with the Mariners. Maybe we get to the World Series, because we were basically having the same team come back. And this was going to be A-Rod's first full season as a Mariner in '96. And with Seattle, they have such a huge fan base in a number of states. So they used to do these caravans that you, as a player, you would go different parts of Washington, you visit schools, you go to radio stations, and you would promote the Mariners to try to get to promote fan base. You know, with Seattle, you used to go down to Portland, Oregon, you used to go to Idaho, you used to go up to Canada, and then used to go to Alaska as well, because the fan base for Seattle went to Alaska. So I went to everywhere else, but I've never been to Alaska. So that year, after the '95 season, Dan Wilson, who was our catcher, and myself, we went to Alaska. We were on my last day of the caravan. We were in Juneau, Alaska, and that's when the trade went down. So I'm sitting in a hotel room in Juneau, Alaska. Next thing you know, I get called by Bob Watson, who was a GM for the Yankees, and on my phone. And I had no idea. You don't have social media, so you have no heads up about what's going on. And Bob Watson, he says, "Hey, I'm Bob Watson with the New York Yankees. I just want to inform you that we just made a trade, and we traded for you and Tino. You're now a New York Yankee." So I was excited because I'm going to the Yankees, because I knew they had a chance to win. I was a little disappointed I'm leaving Seattle, because we thought that maybe we'd come back. And, you know, I told him, I said, "Mr. Watson," I said, "I have one more day, in this Mariner caravan in Alaska, and I'm going back to Seattle. Is it okay if I finish it up?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, no problem." So I finished up the last day of this caravan promoting the Mariners as a Yankee. So it was funny. It was strange. But, you know, when you're getting traded to a team you just played in the playoffs, and you had to figure that, hey, you got a good shot at going back to the playoffs. And that's all you wanted. You got your first taste as a Mariner, and then you're going to New York. I loved playing in New York as a visitor. The fans were just wacko, and it was just an exciting time, old Yankee Stadium. So, you know, I was excited about that, you know, just a little bit disappointed that I wasn't able to finish up anything with the Mariners.
So in that season, that was Jeter's rookie year, right? So you had going on, and Mariano really wasn't Mariano yet at that time. He was setting up Wetland at that time, right?
Right.
So
we had a deep bullpen, yeah.
So talk about that. Talk about that season. I mean, you're watching these guys. Did you know, like from the jump, that Derek Jeter was going to be something special when he started playing, or was that something that you saw over time and said, "Okay, this kid can play"?
No, I think he saw it from day one. I mean, we didn't, you know, in spring training, you really don't know your team as far as pitchers or some in one section, and then you have the position players until the end of spring is when everybody starts coming together. But we didn't, you know, I didn't really see it until opening day, because I knew he was behind me, but I'm trying to do my job, and it's just spring training. You're working on whatever. But the opening series in Cleveland, he just, you know, the way he was on the field, he acted like he's been there for 10 years. And Joe Torre had an unbelievable confidence in him. And he basically went to Mr. Steinbrenner and said, he's going to be my shortstop. There was rumblings that they wanted to trade for a more experienced shortstop because they didn't think Jeter was ready. And Torre goes, no, this guy's going to be my guy. And instantly he just was a superstar. And everybody at that young age, and him being a rookie, all the veteran guys followed him because, once he stepped between the lines, it was all business. And that's what the Yankees were all about. Even in the minor league system, when you played these guys in the minor leagues, you hated them because they were just the way they carried themselves. And it wasn't an arrogance that you hated, but it was an arrogance that they had, that they knew that they were going to beat you. And that's just the way Mr. Steinbrenner, coached up and taught everybody in the Yankee system, and it just carried all the way to the big leagues. And I think that's one of the reasons why we had such a success, and guys that came over to us, that the number one priority, not just to play well, but you wanted to win. And if you didn't win, you were highly disappointed.
What was it? You mentioned him. What was it like, with him? Did he come down and talk to you guys? Did he come into the clubhouse? Steinbrenner, I'm talking about. Was he as vocal and as visible? Because this is after now he had the 2 years off hiatus, whatever you want to call it. There's a documentary out now, and that the stuff that was going on in the clubhouse then was crazy. You had Mel Hall bringing live cougars in the clubhouse, and it was nuts. So I know he always kept that, the general mentality and everything. Was he around much? Was he vocal with you guys?
Yeah, he was there every day in spring training, so everybody noticed him all the time. During the season, he was only at Yankee Stadium during special events. If there was a giveaway, if you're playing a special team, his main base was in Tampa, so we would see him all the time when we would go down and play. Then it was the Devil Rays, now it's the Rays. So you had to beat the Red Sox all the time. You had to beat the Rays. When he came up, he was vocal. I mean, he was a fan that ran it like a business, but he was a fan because he wanted the best for the city. He always wanted to produce a winner. So if you weren't producing on the field, he definitely went up to you and let you have it. And he would test guys because New York's such a tough place to play. It was back then, a lot tougher than I think now, that he would go up and he would say certain things to players, and he did it to everyone. And he wanted to see how many guys actually stood up for themselves and actually had confidence. Now, you never got into war words with them, but you actually did stand up for yourself and say, and give him a sense a sense of confidence that he felt, okay, this guy can handle New York. Because there was a lot of guys who would crawl under a rock. I mean, we had a guy in Kenny Rogers that he was such a great pitcher, but for New York, he didn't have a lot of success. And Mr. Steinbrenner would come up to him a lot. He goes, hey, I'm paying you all this money. I did this, I did that. I expect more out of you. He was that kind of owner, and he wouldn't sugarcoat anything. And if you didn't say anything back to him, then he knew that, this guy might not be able to handle it here. Now, if you said stuff back to him in a confident way, then he's like, all right, I don't have to worry about him.
Now, you mentioned it a little bit. We'll call it the aura of the Pinstripes, right? And talk about, you talked about, the arrogance and that. Did you feel like when you went to the Yankees after, you come back from Alaska and you fly in, did you walk into the organization and say, that's why this is different?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you look at their history, and I knew the game. I knew the players of the past. I grew up an Oriole fan. I hated the Yankees when I grew up. I wanted to be. I didn't even like them. I didn't even like them when I played against them in the minor leagues. But I knew the history and who played there. When I was in Seattle, when I was in the big leagues, I actually caught a couple old timers games as a Mariner. So I would sit in the dugout and I would look at Mickey Mantle and Phil Rizzuto, Joe DiMaggio was there. And so I would see those type of players, and I know who they were. I knew what kind of players they were back in the day. I mean, I might not have seen them on TV, but I knew who they were. So when you get to spring training, the Yankees, and they still do, they did such a great job of bringing back the ex-players as far as putting uniforms on them. And that way everybody could see, hey, these guys have done it. And Mr. Steinbrenner was always one of those owners that he wants the old Yankees to rub off on the new guys. And, when we had old timers day when I was a Yankee, now we dress in separate locker rooms. But back then he was like, absolutely not. These guys are dressing, these old timers are dressing with the players of today. I want those guys to see what happened and what was before them. And that was the way that's the way he was as an owner. But you put on the pinstripes, and I remember my first outing in spring training. I was like, holy crap, this is the history of what the Yankees are. And I'm putting on the NY that Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, Yogi Berra, these guys wore the same thing. And I'm like, holy crap. And you start shaking a little bit until you finally get that first out. And you're like, you know what? I'm a part of something that very few guys ever get to be a part of. And then afterwards, obviously, after 5 World Series and we win 4, it's just you look back and it's like it's even more amazing. But you're representing the most historic franchise in every sport, in all sports, and it does. You know it immediately.
What about playing? What were the differences playing for Lou Piniella versus Joe Torre? Two guys. Lou was a fiery guy, right? I mean, he was famous for that when he was a player, and then when he managed the Yankees too, he was a little crazy. But talk about that for a second.
Two perfect guys in their city. You get the fiery Lou Piniella that is in a laid back atmosphere of Seattle. So that was perfect for the Mariners because you needed that fire. And Joe Torre, a laid back manager in a fiery city, that was a perfect fit. I played for Lou, and I tell him today, I said, you were the reason why I had success in New York. Because he was a guy that took the New York mentality out in Seattle, that the expectation level was always great. He always expected a lot of you, just like you should expect a lot out of yourself. And you had to learn to have thick skin. I would go through a wall for both Lou Piniella and Joe Torre. And I always had thick skin playing for Lou Piniella because he knew he didn't like pitchers back then. He hated pitchers when he played. He didn't like pitchers when he managed either. But he knew pitchers needed to get him through the game and for him to have success. And I pitched in every single situation and scenario possible. I played the outfield, came in and pitched the next day. It was just one of those guys that I absolutely loved playing for. But he taught me to have thick skin. He taught me that, hey, you're going to have failure in this game. And he taught me how to overcome that. And he taught me that, hey, in stressful situations, you got to act a certain way. You got to embrace it. You got to do certain things so you can succeed. If you crawl in a hole and all of a sudden you start tightening up and tensing up, he says, you're not going to make it. He was a very passionate manager. He showed it. He wore his feelings on his sleeve. You always saw it in the dugout. But he had his players back. And, when I came back the second time as a Mariner in 2001, and I won 4 World Series as a Yankee, you could see, I guess, the respect level that he had for me compared to when I was first a Mariner. That so you know what, you succeeded in New York like he succeeded in New York. You won a World Series, and you know what, it was a different type of relationship when I came back the second time. But I always tell him, hey, you're the reason why I had success in New York. I absolutely love playing for him, and I learned a tremendous amount from him.
Yeah, and then when you made the All-Star team in 2001, Joe was the manager of that team as well, right?
Yes.
And he was the innovator of what we looked up, because we are professional journalists, Jeff, just so you know. We do our due diligence, all right? So Joe was the innovator of that middle relief guy, which is where you fit in, and how important that role is to a championship team, having won all those World Series. So when you got called up, that had to be a special phone call. Who told you that you made the team? Was it Joe?
Yeah, I got called down by my pitching coach in Seattle, Brian Price, who was a teammate of mine in the minor leagues. And I actually thought I was going to make the team in 2000 when I was a Yankee, because we won all those years. And it was always your manager that was the All-Star, the winning manager, or the World Series manager was the All-Star manager. Right. So I thought I was going to make it in 2000, and I didn't. And as a middle reliever, a setup guy, back then, it was almost impossible to make the All-Star team because it was basically starters and closers.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, if I can't make it in 2000, I'm never going to have the chance. So I had a really good first half with the Mariners. And next thing you know, I get a call. I'm getting ready to warm. I thought I was supposed to get up in the bullpen to start warming up. And my pitching coach said, "Hey, we just want to let you know that you made the All-Star team." And it was actually in Seattle. You know, I was a Mariner. So it was even more special. And I think it was me, Mike Stanton, and Paul Quantrell, and we were the three setup guys that made it that year. And I think we might have been the first setup guys to ever make the All-Star team. And so I go and I pitch, and it was really, there was no nerves because I'm pitching in my home stadium.
Yeah.
I look around the infield. There was 8 Mariners that made the team, made the All-Star team. Plus there was like 6 Yankees. So I'm looking at shortstop, and it was, you know, it was Derek Jeter. The third baseman I played with anyway was Alex Rodriguez.
Right.
You know, I have Brett Boone at second, so he was my teammate. John Olerud was the first baseman. He was my teammate.
Yeah.
Jorge Posada was the catcher, so I already threw to him last year. So like half of my team, or 3/4 of the team that were out there, were all guys that I already knew. So all the nerves of being an all-star were all out the window. And back then we wanted to win. You know, I wanted to beat the National League. So, you know, I was lucky enough because Joe Torre came to me, Quantrell, and Mike Stanton. He said, "Listen," he said, "I'm going to have you guys split 2 innings." And I think Quantrell went in first. He got in a little trouble, so Stanton had to get him out of his jam. And then I wound up pitching the 7th inning. So it was I got to pitch a whole inning, so it was exciting.
That's great. Yeah, cool. That's good stuff. All right, Jeff. So now give us some good Yankee stories from your time there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. The city's electric. You know, every time you guys step out on the field, it's a packed house. Talk about some of the stories that you had from being with the New York Yankees.
But, you know, the best one, I mean, we win in 96, we lose in 97, which is disappointing because we got beat in the first round. And 98, we come back. And our first road trip. So we always, in baseball, we always had exhibition games before the season started. You either went to another major league city and played an exhibition game at a city that you probably wouldn't play during the regular season. In 98, we go and we're getting ready to play. We're going out to San Diego. We're going to play San Diego State, I think, a couple of games. And then we're just going to bust it up to Anaheim and open the season with the Angels. So we're leaving spring training, and we have this airline's called Icelandic Air. It looked like a sawed-off 747. So it had it upstairs and all this. And because it was from Iceland, for some reason, this airline could not land in 2 U.S. cities. So it landed in Tampa. So it could only land in another country. It couldn't land in San Diego. So we landed in Tijuana. So we get out and the buses. Yeah, exactly. So we're in Tijuana. It's at nighttime. And, you know, Tijuana, I don't know how far it is from San Diego. It's not very far. So we get on the buses, and there's a player bus, and then there's a coaches and media bus. So we're in the players bus, and I think we have one coach. It's like a chaperone for some reason. They got to throw a coach on the players bus. So we're behind. And you know those Jersey barriers, and this is how our season started. Those Jersey barriers that divide highways, those cement things are about 2 feet tall, 3 feet tall. So our bus driver is going, and we're maybe 200 yards from the border. He goes around this exit, and these Jersey barriers start about maybe 8 inches on the ground, and then they gradually go up to 2 feet. I don't know what the hell this guy was thinking, but he goes up this he goes and tries to take this exit to go too close to the border. He drives up the Jersey barrier. So half of the bus is on the Jersey barrier. The other half is on regular cement, regular road.
Wow.
Our bus is almost getting ready to tip over. And this is the players' bus. I have David Wells across from me. Everything's falling off to one side. And we go about halfway, and the whole bus is almost on its side, getting ready to tip over. And somehow this guy freaking drives off of it. And next thing you know, everything's all over the place. And then he stops. We get out as a team, the whole Yankee team, we get out, and we're walking about 100 yards to the border. So we walk all the way to the border of the United States, and then we finally get on the bus on the other side of the border. And nobody knows. Mr. Steinbrenner has no idea that this happened, or he would have freaking lost it. So Brian Cashman back then, I think that might have been one of either first or second year that he was our GM. So we go and play our couple exhibition games in San Diego. We go up to Anaheim. We get swept by the Angels. We go to Oakland. We lose the first game. So we're 0-4. And this is in 98. Next thing you know, the papers are going crazy. We're firing Joe Torre because we lost in 97. And then we finally win our the fifth game of the year. We finally break through with a win. And then fast forward, we probably wind up being the greatest team that ever was.
Yeah.
We won 125 games that year. We're 125 and 50. We did things that year that no other club has ever done before. But to start the year the way we did, I mean, even Brian Cashman to this day says, you know what? I don't think Mr. Steinbrenner still knows what happened in the beginning of the year when we flew into Tijuana. But it was just, it's just remarkable. And we didn't even have, I mean, you look at the team, I think we had 10 guys with over 10 home runs, but we didn't have a 30 home run guy, but we led in offense. We led in every offensive category. We led in every pitching category. I mean, we went out every single game and thinking that we were going to beat the crap out of everyone. It was just one of those years that the way it started and the way it ended, it was just amazing.
Yeah,
it's a good thing he didn't know, because you guys would have had to do that every year before you started.
Exactly.
Yeah, he would have lost. Can you imagine, Jeff, if the boss found out that? Oh my God, that would have been nuts.
And Sonny, you're right. He was such a big superstition guy. I mean, we had this one. We would play in the playoffs, and he would have this. There was a time that this young girl, she had to be like 10 or 11 years old, and sing the national anthem. And we would win. She'd be back the next day singing the national anthem. And then we would have this bald eagle, is that Challenger that would fly from center field all the way. That was every day. Every single time we won a series or a game, the freaking bald eagle would fly from center field all the way to the pitcher's mound every single day. It was he was a big superstition guy. If it went well, the same thing's happening the next day.
Yeah, argue with success.
Yeah,
that team was unbelievable, because I mean, you kind of knew when you walked out there, you expected it. That was the way it was going, and that's when Mariano started to really become Mariano. I mean, at that point, and then everybody knows what happened. But in that series, you swept San Diego in the World Series. I think Brocious was MVP back then, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I liked when. Even though interleague play started in 97 when we started playing the National League, I actually enjoyed the fact that in 96, we had no idea what the Braves were like because they were a National League team. And in San Diego in 98, we had no idea what San Diego was about, besides like scouting reports or what we saw on TV. Right. We didn't play those guys in interleague. So it was a really nice surprise to play a team that neither team knew about the other.
I got to ask you one question. When you got called up to the bigs, and you're now in the bigs, you said game 2 in Milwaukee. Who on the team, or who kind of took you a little bit under their wing and kind of showed you, like, now that you're in the show and you're in the bigs, who reached out and helped you become more of a major leaguer mentality?
Well, they had a starting pitcher named Brian Holman back then, and he was a guy that always sat me down, and he would talk to me all the time about being in the big leagues, about facing guys, and trusting your stuff. And then we had a closer back then, Mike Schooler, who was in the bullpen, and he really showed me a lot as well. And I said, I always watched other pitchers and how they did their business, how they would face hitters, so I learned from that. But also I had those guys, and Randy Johnson and Jay Buhner were one of those guys that were the hardest to get to know. But once you got to know them and you got in their circle, so-called, then it was really easy. It made it like an easy time. And I was fortunate enough, I had Dan Worthen as a pitching coach. And when I got the call a couple days, second game into the season, he came to me, and they probably knew that we weren't going to have a good year. We wound up losing 98 games that year. He came to me, he says, listen, he says, I wanted to put your mind at ease. You're not going anywhere. He says, you're going to be here the whole entire year. Pitch the way everybody saw you pitch in spring training, and don't worry about if you have a bad game, you're not getting sent out. That doesn't happen too often. Usually if you get called up, you're always looking over your shoulder. If you have a bad game, am I getting sent back to the minor leagues? So I was very fortunate with that, to be able to go and ease my mind a little bit. If I had a bad game, then hey, it was just a bad game. Let me get back out there because I knew I wasn't going back down.
Did anybody tell you not to bring fungus shower shoes?
Oh yeah, we had It's the practical jokes were a number of practical jokes. You know, being a reliever, you know, I was one of the biggest practical joker, and you know, you probably it's like Vegas. What happens down there stays down there.
Yep, I get that.
Okay, enough said.
We had that.
I love it.
I got a couple more for you, Jeff, because we're getting close to the end here. But talk about that World Series with the Mets. Much to Sonny's chagrin, I know he's been trying to avoid the subject, but
my reception's getting
the city. The city was crazy at that point.
Yes.
You know, it was the first real, you know, you say the Subway Series during the year. Okay. Yeah. That was the first real Subway Series in a long, long time. So talk about what it was like in the city. You guys only had a 10-minute bus ride to get to Shea, right?
Yeah. You know what? We backed into the playoffs that year because we lost our last 6 games of the year. I think we only won like 86 games and we won the division, but we wound up winning it in Baltimore because I think the Red Sox, whoever was in second place, wound up losing it, and we won the division. And then we go on. Everybody's like, you know, we go out and play the A's, and we played the first 2 there, then we played the second 2 in New York, then we had to fly back and play in Game 5. But the A's started talking smack as well and saying, oh, you know, the Yankees are an older team. They backed their way in. It's our time. You know, that was the whole money, you know, close to the Moneyball era, even though 01 was Moneyball. They were like, oh, you know, we're going to beat the Yankees. This is our year. And because of Joe Torre, we were never a team. We always did our talking on the field. Torre did not want anyone speaking to the media and talking any kind of smack. That was like a taboo. Do not do that. All the other teams did. So we get past the A's, and then we get past the Mariners. And then we play the Mets. And, you know, the Yankees, because they were so used to going to the World Series, they sold their World Series tickets right away. Once we made the playoffs, they were selling World Series tickets. Well, the Mets didn't sell their World Series tickets till they knew they were in the World Series.
Right.
So we had half Yankee fans, half Met fans at Shea Stadium. And the same thing. The Mets started talking smack. You had Agbayani and Turk Wendell and all these guys. Oh, we're going to beat the Yankees in 5. And it was like, you know, go ahead. I mean, they had a good team. Obviously, had a good team. And by that point, we already won 12 World Series games in a row. And we get to the World Series. We're playing against the Mets. And you're right. The city was nuts. I mean, the memorabilia, the sporting goods, the houses. One Yankee fan, one Met fan, and neighbors. I mean, it was just so exciting. It was just. I guess the rest of the world didn't care, but the New York area was just going nuts. And, you know, we win the first game. We wound up losing the second game. And then we beat them in 5 over at Shea.
Yep.
And our first game 3 over at Shea, there was a pipe that burst. So Mr. Steinbrenner was the Shea Stadium was a dump and our locker room was a dump. So Steinbrenner took every single thing out of our locker room as far as seats, couches, whatever it was. He said, get rid of all this crap that's in the visiting locker room. I'm bringing over all the players' chairs, the couches, everything to make them feel comfortable. We had a pipe burst in the visiting locker room. I don't know if it was a sore pipe or whatever it was, but he was like, oh, you know what? Clean this crap up. You know, he's actually picking up chairs himself and putting them in guys' lockers. So he was like hands-on. And we wound up winning in 5. And, you know, whenever we had a closeout in a series, we knew we were going to win. You know, it was just one of those things that, you know, we knew we were going to beat the Mets. I mean, they talked a lot of smack. They did have a good team, but they talked a lot of smack. I remember NSYNC sang the national anthem over at Shea, and the fans booed them. You know, you're getting booed for singing the national anthem. So it's just there's no other place than New York, and especially in the playoffs back then. It's just exciting.
I was at Game 5 with my wife and my sister and brother-in-law, and I got to tell you, the place was shaking. I thought the place was going to come down, man. Especially when they took the lead, the whole place was doing this. And my sister-in-law got so nervous she ran into the hallway. She thought it was coming down, and then to see Bernie make that catch at the end, and that was it. And just walking out of there with all New York fans there, it was really a cool experience, to see that in person, So you can go ahead and tell Sonny, what's your favorite ring? You already told me, Jeff. So go ahead, share that.
Yeah.
With us.
It's always, it's always 2000, because I have a lot of Met fans or Met friends, and I wear that all the time. It's not all the time, but if I'm going to special occasions, I would wear that just to rub it into the Met fans. Jim Duquette's a good friend of mine. That was the assistant GM over there. And I make sure that he knows who won the World Series that year. So it's fun.
All right, I'm getting it. I'm getting the picture. I'm getting the picture.
All right. So Jeff, now that you're doing stuff with Yes, okay, what do you think of the current team that's out there today?
I think it's a very good team. I think offensively, by adding Juan Soto, this has been an incredible boost to the lineup. And also having Verdugo out there, everybody had questions. Oh, how is this guy in the clubhouse? How's this guy as a player? I was a big fan of the trade. I thought this was a great trade that they made with the Red Sox, and he's been a huge plus. And they're doing it pitching without Garrett Cole. They're pitching well.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
I think that's one place that they'll probably wind up having to add is pitching. And their bullpen, even though their bullpen's doing well, they don't have a lot of swing and miss. They're not a strikeout club. So when you get into key situations, and especially the playoffs, when you're facing the number one pitcher, the number two pitcher against other teams, and you need guys to come out of the bullpen and get key strikeouts, they don't have that. And that's one thing that they might wind up adding. Holmes has been great so far in the ninth inning. Hopefully that continues. But the pitching is the only, I guess, if on their team. Now there's the American League, I think is a little down this year. If you look at last year with the National League, there was the Braves, you had the Phillies were a decent team, and you had the Dodgers. I mean, obviously the Diamondbacks went to the World Series, but as far as a good team, everybody else was like mediocre. I think that's all of a sudden American League now. I mean, you look at the Yankees and the Orioles, the two best teams in the American League by far. And the Orioles are probably better than the Yankees all around. But other than that, Seattle has good starting pitching. You look in the Central, not a lot of great teams in the Central. The Yankees have gone and played the Twins, who were on a hot streak, and they swept them. So, the American League is down a little bit. So, you have two teams, and the only team you have to worry about is the Orioles, I think, if you're a Yankee fan.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like you said, this kid, Soto, you don't get to see the guy play much when he was in San Diego. We don't get to see them much out here, but wow, is he's some ball player. He's only he's 25 years old, right, Jeff?
25 years old. Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, I hope they get to keep him. Who knows what happens when that day comes, but and they look like they're having fun. They're doing things that a lot of the Yankee teams were so businesslike. It was like very stale kind of, but they look like they're having some fun. I mean, I think that goes to the younger players in any sport. It's a little different than when we played whatever we played. I mean, we were talking about that at one point. I mean, they get to the ballpark really early. You guys didn't get there till like 3 o'clock. Right?
No, that we didn't get there till late, but we hung out later. So it was like we got there, like you said, like 3. If we're on the road, 3:34. But we were at the ballpark later. At home, we didn't because we got back to the families. But when we were on the road, we hung out. I mean, our locker room was a place that we hung out. Nowadays, they don't hang out. I mean, they go back to the room and they're playing video games. But you're right. Winning obviously helps having fun.
Yeah,
but I think they've added a couple players that have made a huge difference in that lineup. And that's what the thing that's, last year offensively, they weren't good enough. They weren't a good offensive team. But adding, having a Rizzo stay healthy, adding Soto and Verdugo has really lengthened that lineup. And this is his second year for Volpe. So Volpe's even had a good season and leading off. And you don't even have LeMahieu. And who knows what's going to happen when he comes back.
When he comes back, it's an incredible lineup. So
yeah.
Yep. So you came back to retire as a Yankee. what was your thought process there? Just because of the success that you guys had as a team, or what was your thought process with that?
Yeah, you know, they had some football players that did it before in the NFL, and I might have been the first major league player to do it and sign with a team and retire. My agents, I had two guys that I played with, in Jeff Fry and a guy named Jeff Franklin. And they asked me, said, okay, you know, you're done playing, you're going to go into media. Said, you ever considered retiring with the team? I'm like, no, because I only played basically most of my career with Seattle and New York. And he goes, how about if we contact the Yankees and you retire as a Yankee? I'm like, sure, that would be great. I mean, I never heard that before, but, you know, there's maybe a couple football players that have done it.
Yeah.
So they just called Brian Cashman. You sign a minor league deal, a one day deal. You can't sign a big league deal because they're afraid that you'll hold it to them and, you know, they'll owe you money or whatever.
Right.
So you sign a minor league deal and you retire as a Yankee. So it was pretty cool.
That is cool. That is cool. Well, Jeff, it's been, I thank you so much for coming out and hanging with us, man, and sharing your time with us.
My
it's
pleasure.
Always good to see you guys. Different for us. We're usually talking college hoops, but this was special to be able to talk to you and get a different perspective from a major league athlete, you know, like yourself. So thanks a lot for coming on with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Sonny.
Thanks, Jeff.
Right.
Hey,
hang out for a second. We're going to wrap this up, and then we'll catch up. Go ahead.
As a pitcher, I got to ask you, you got bases loaded, 2 outs, 3-2 count. What's your go-to strikeout pitch?
I'm throwing a slider.
There it is.
Throwing a slider all day.
I knew it, but I
the guy's right-handed, right, Jeff?
Yeah, if it was a lefty up, then I'm probably not in the game. So if it's a righty, then I'm in.
Then he's in. That's it.
I love it.
Okay, so you've been listening to and watching the Big East Rewind with Chuck Everson and Sonny Sparrow. The Big East Rewind is produced and directed by Nick Chico Chorus and Daryl Gurney. Check us out on all things social media by putting Big East Rewind in the search bar, and also check out our website, and we'll keep you up to date on everything on www.bigeastrewind.com. Thanks a lot for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks, folks. Thanks, Jeff.